Welcome to SYNC-O-WICZ, hosted by the fearless Linda SYNC-O-WICZ. She's syncing you up with the latest in election integrity, from breaking headlines to critical updates you won't hear anywhere else. With Linda, it's facts first as she leads the fight for one vote for one legal voter. Stay informed, stay empowered. Let's jump in.
Hi, and welcome to SYNC-O-WICZ. My name is Linda SYNC-O-WICZ. I am the founder and CEO of Fight Voter Fraud. You're watching us on OBBM Network TV, and some of you may be watching us on YouTube or Rumble as well. So this week, it is our 27th episode, and our guest is Todd Wood from CDM. We'll be talking about him very shortly. And the states that we're going to be reviewing are Florida, Kansas, Minnesota, South Carolina, Texas, and we added a new segment that's called Election and Voting Terms. And then we go to our trivia question and national news to our vote notes. So let's start it off right now with Todd Wood from CDM. He is the founder, CEO, publisher, editor-in-chief with the
Got them all.
I got them all. Well, I am just so glad I am finally able to reciprocate to you because you've had me on your show several times.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you. We're all in for voter fraud, Linda, so love to be here. Thank you.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us about what CDM does?
We are a global network. We have 13 digital properties all around the world. We started off in Eastern Europe, but have spread into the Middle East and in the U.S. We have 7 local papers in the U.S. You were in Connecticut at one of our facilities there where we, the Connecticut Sentinel, spelled with a C, the old-fashioned revolutionary way. We resurrected that paper, and it's been extremely effective in Connecticut because of the lack of any kind of free media in Connecticut. It's all owned by Soros. But we're all about just bringing truth. I was telling your Olivia before the show that we've been attacked for that. We were deplatformed heavily, and we've been debanked, cyber attacks, death threats, all of it. And we talk about the issues early that people may not know about, but usually we've been borne out to be right. So that's what we're about, just trying to be a network that brings good free media globally.
And you've been around for how long?
The network has been around. Actually, I left the military in 1994, and then I went to Wall Street for about 20 years, and then 2011 I started traveling the world. I had studied Russian at the Air Force Academy, and I traveled all over Eastern Europe and learned a lot about that. And I realized nobody knew anything about what was going on over there. And this was in 2011. So we started building a news network. I was working for the Washington Times for years, and then Newsmax a little bit, doing some work for them. And then I just decided, you know what, we're going to do our own thing. And so the first site we started was in 2015, but really the company really started growing in 2019 when we raised some money and built the CDM platform, and everything feeds into that. And so I guess you could say around 6 years we've been going strong.
Which is fantastic, because you always have the truth. You're getting information out there that the mainstream and drive-by media will never talk about.
Yeah, well, we have what's different about us is we have reporters literally on the ground all over the world due to my military connections, Wall Street connections. We built news connection sources. And for instance, you mentioned fighting voter fraud, and you mentioned Florida. Well, we were early on Ukraine, and I'll tell you how that connects. But we built a network there, and starting in 2015, and little did I know it'd become the center of the political universe. And so we've done a lot of really good reporting, and we were deplatformed for that on the corruption of the U.S. national security state over there. And I ended up actually giving information to some of the congressional bodies on that whole thing. And then it just turned into this huge thing. And what we've come to realize is that the reason they're fighting so hard in Ukraine is a lot of the voter fraud and censorship is there's a narrative consensus being built that's run out of there. So a lot of the stuff that you're seeing in the U.S. is run out of there. And so we have reporters on the ground, people that we can call sources, and get the information out, before people really know what's happening.
But wait a minute, there's no voter fraud. There's no problem with the elections.
Well, yeah, according to
There's
the
no problem.
according to the narratives. I'm heartened by the vote by mail comments that executive orders that Trump has issued. I'm waiting for action on the machines. I think that has to happen. And the stuff that's going on in Florida, we can talk about that. But I know a lot about Florida because we have a paper down in Miami. So,
All right. Well, why don't you tell us about what's going on in Florida right now?
So Florida has been running we call it the election fraud cartel, and it's run from the top down. For instance, the recent supervisor of elections races last year were completely corrupt. None of the MAGA populist candidates won. Chris Gleason in Pinellas County, for instance, he found out in his race that there was 235,000 vote by mail ballot requests went out from the office on a Sunday, right before the election when the office was closed. So those were fraudulent. A lot of them were returned. Some of them were undeliverable, and even the ones that were undeliverable were returned. And so they were voted. And so that was 100,000 votes. He lost the election. I went to the trial in Florida, and the judge sealed all the evidence and threw out the case. So nobody can see all the evidence he presented. Why would that be? Because a lot of there's judicial corruption down in Florida too. So it's at the local level. It's all the way up to the top. It's vote by mail, classic examples. I was on the Miami-Dade Republican Executive Committee for years, and we brought 50,000 ballots to Cord Bird and said, these are fake. They're on the rolls. What are you going to do about them? And he said, well, nothing. And he said, sue me. So, I mean, it's institutionalized in Florida because in my view, it's a kind of a mafia that runs the elections in our country. And as you know, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that shouldn't happen that happens every day, right?
Right. And I know, speaking of Florida, we tell people Florida has the Lazarus effect. I mean, people die, and then 20 years later, they come back to life and start voting again.
Yes.
We've seen that. We've seen people who are removed and registered at non-existent addresses without them even knowing it, and then they're put back on their regular one, which you can tell because it says your registration date is like February of 2021, but you've been voting from the same place for 20 years.
Right.
There shouldn't be a new registration date. I mean, there's a lot of funky stuff that goes on. It's not just Florida, but these are the ones we know with Florida. And even vote history has miraculously changed.
Well, in Florida, it's institutionalized. For instance, we found out how they were doing a lot of the machine fraud. It was called blank ballots, where the machines would adjudicate a ballot as blank, meaning that the person voted entirely a blank ballot. Well, this was happening in some jurisdictions in 2020, like in Broward, I think it was 20% of the district or the precincts were voting blank ballots. That's impossible. Nobody goes, there's 5 million people in the county. 1 million people don't go to the vote and not vote anything and just turn in a blank ballot. Doesn't happen. So we found all this data, or not me, but a team did, and they brought it to the AG's attention. And what did they do? Instead of going after that problem, they passed a law called the Election Integrity Act, where they outlawed that data from being released to the public. So it's really the Election Fraud Act, in our opinion. So they're institutionalizing the fraud in certain states, and every state's different, as you know. I mean, different tactics.
Right. But since we were just talking about Florida, I know last January of 2024, we had like 12 or 1,500 deceased voters in Florida that we had evidence that they died, and 21.86% of them were voting.
Yeah.
It was
great trick if you can do it, right?
I know, it was crazy. But, we did luck out that there was an investigation started, and I had someone in DC about 2 months ago asked me, she's a fight voter fraud. You sent something down, concerning the deceased voters. And she did acknowledge they were looking into it.
Wow. Good for you.
Wow. At least it's a start.
Well, I know you've been very effective around the country raising these issues. So that's much appreciated, because we need everybody in the fight, right?
Yeah, and just like you, we are attacked
Hmm.
all the time. I'm this horrible person, by the way.
Yeah, of course.
I
Me
I'm
too.
just I'm
We
just
can be horrible
horrific.
together.
Yeah. It's like we know over the last few years that we don't even stand up saying, there's this fraud or there's that fraud. We just constantly show them the evidence
Hmm.
and show them
Hmm.
the evidence, and they have a very difficult time actually grasping that there's evidence contrary to their mantra or their rhetoric.
Well,
You
that's
know,
the best way. We try to do that across the board, not just with voter fraud, but all issues. If you just hold up the mirror and say, "This is what's happening. Look here," and you don't even have to comment or say it's bad, or you just say, "This is happening,"
mhm.
and it's very hard for them to refute that. So that's a very good tactic, and we just have to rinse, repeat, keep doing it more and more.
Oh, yes, absolutely, and you've just been doing such a phenomenal job in getting all the information on everything out there, not just on the voter information. Right now, what would you say is the most important story? Doesn't have to be with the voter fraud.
Stopping the wars.
Mhm.
I have kids. I have some relatives, kids in the military. I don't want them in Ukraine. I don't want them in the Middle East. I think the public's on board with that. We just have to be very loud and very insistent that the Ukraine war. They're killing on just on the Ukrainian side. We're estimating 8 to 9,000 people a week.
Ugh,
I mean, how do you sustain that? I mean, it's a
I know.
depopulation effort, and it's really about getting rid of the indigenous population and capturing the resources. And then now they're talking about importing third world entities, another migration wave, so they can essentially put in slaves to work the land and the resources. That's
Wow.
what's going on. So, and it's Europe wants a global war, and we don't. And
Yeah.
we're trying to get our message to the president in different ways and to members of Congress and to apply the pressure. We don't want a global war. I mean, and if you look at some of the globalist leaders in Europe, Starmer, Merge, Macron, they're all
Yeah,
callous at the EU. They're all pushing for it as fast. They're
I know.
creating crises like fake drone attacks into Norway and all this stuff, just to say, okay, well, now we can shoot down Russian planes. And they're trying to get to a point where they can have some kind of incident to create a war. And that's, to me, the biggest story.
Well, also the other thing is you don't hear anything coming out of Russia or from the Russian people about the Ukraine war. Because I just found out the other day that if you even say the word war, you're gonna be in jail for at least 7 years. They
It's
cannot even acknowledge that there is a war going on if you live in Russia.
That's true. Well, it's also Ukraine. I mean, and they're attacking the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They're attacking the church. I was just in Armenia, the same thing. But yeah, I'm not a Putin supporter, but it's both sides. We wanted this war. That's the message that I want to get out. I mean, the West wanted this war, and they're trying to increase it. And that's, to me, it's just that has to stop. If Trump wants to end the war, stop the weapons and let's end it. Stop the
Yeah,
killing. Stop the killing.
absolutely.
So
Well, Todd, thank you so much for coming on my program or our program,
sure.
SYNC-O-WICZ. We really appreciate the information that you've given us on Florida and also globally. So,
Mhm.
how can people get in touch with you?
The best put cdm.press in your daily scan, morning, noon, and night. Just check us a few times a day. We put out dozens of good content a day, articles, videos. We do a lot of video work, a lot of shows. So you can find us there. And then there's an email there, or you can DM me on X. I'm real Todd Wood on X. And we try to respond to everything as quick as we can. So we try to stay in touch with our readers and viewers. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Todd. We really appreciate it. We're going to go to a quick break and we'll be right back.
Fight voter fraud can't fight alone. As a 501c4 nonpartisan nonprofit, we rely on your generous donations to move our mission forward. If you believe in election integrity, clean voter rolls, and one vote for one legal voter, we would greatly appreciate your support.
Hi, and welcome back to SYNC-O-WICZ. You're watching us again on OBBM Network TV, YouTube, and or Rumble. And that was Todd Wood, our guest for the week. Now we're going to go to our first state, which ironically is Florida. I say ironically because we just spoke about it in our last section with Todd. So, Florida, our source is from Florida Politics. This was on September 25th. State attorney declines to pursue charges against Monroe GOP officials after election probe. So, the Monroe County top Republican leaders will not be charged by prosecutors over a disputed $20,000 political donation that set off months of infighting, allegations of fraud, and almost a 1-year investigation. In a memo finalized last month by State Attorney Amira Fox on the 20th Judicial Circuit, said they found insufficient evidence that the Representative Party or Republican Party of Monroe, the chair, Rhonda Reben Lopez, and then Treasurer Sherry Hodis violated state law when the organization endorsed and donated to Hodis' successful Supervisor of Elections campaign. Now, there's lots of accusations have been thrown about concerning this case. And the state attorney, again, Amira Fox, said in the report, quote, "The evidence is clear that different members of the MCREC had different interpretations of the RPOF Rule 8-B, and members had little to no experience with that RPOF Rule 8-B, unquote." So if you're interested, again, you can go to the source, again, was Florida Politics, if you want to read all the back and forth, because we condensed it down. There is a lot of stuff being thrown back and forth. Now we're going to go on to the state of Kansas. This is from the McPherson Sentinel on September 24th. Kansas is among 9 states to swap voter rolls with Texas in an effort to find duplicates and prevent fraud. So Secretary of State Scott Schwab partnered with Texas to swap voter rolls, which he said will improve accuracy and election integrity. Now, the other states that are involved in this memorandum of understanding, I guess you'd call it, are Alabama, Arkansas, again, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Ohio, South Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. So yay to all of them for sharing the information. This will help them each find people who are registered in both states and voting in both states. You can only vote once and in one state. So now we're going to go on to Minnesota. This is from MPR News on September 25th, 2025. Trump's DOJ sues Minnesota election officials over registration data. So where have we heard this before? This is a constant repeat lately, but this one is Minnesota. The Department of Justice has filed a federal lawsuit against Minnesota's Secretary of State, Steve Simon, over his refusal to comply with their request. So in June, the Department of Justice requested data about Minnesota's compliance with the maintenance of their voter registration list. The letter asked for the full statewide voter registration list, which included names, driver's license numbers, and partial Social Security numbers and date of births for the voters. Simon's office responded only with data provided on the maintenance and refused to send the entire list. So Simon's office will work with the Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison's office to fight the lawsuit. Once again, another one. Just turn it over. South Carolina Daily Gazette, September 24, 2025. South Carolina election agency faces ongoing legal challenges over voter rolls amid directors, plural, firing. So I guess the attorneys were in court as the South Carolina Election Agency continues to face challenges from two directions. A lawsuit over whether it should turn over the voter information to the feds, and then consecutive firings of its top directors. So DOJ asked for the same voter information as requested from other states. Ann Crook, a South Carolina voter, filed a lawsuit in response, citing privacy concerns. Meanwhile, the court appearance comes a day after the agency's deputy director, Paige Salinowicz, was fired for placing a recording device in a room where the state election commissioning's governing board uses for meetings. The second termination of top officials in less than a week. The commission fired Salinowicz after she was allegedly caught on tape placing the, quote, unauthorized device. She's accused of leaving the recorder in the room on September 17th. That's the same day the commission voted 3-2 following a closed-door meeting to fire Howard Knapp, the executive director since 2023, out of a desire for new leadership. She's also accused of raising her voice to agency leadership, using profanity, and disrupting the office the day of Knapp's firing. Lots of other issues and legal issues over this and the lawsuit, and I've got to tell you, what a mess. So now we're going to go on to Texas. Texas, this is from the Sanchez News, September 25th, 2025. This concerns deadlines, voter ID requirements for Texas voters. So Texans who are planning to vote in the upcoming election cycle should be aware of key deadlines and requirements that will impact their ability to cast a vote in 2025. So the last day to register is Monday, October 6th. So that's the last day you can register. Early voting begins on Monday, October 20th, and continues through Friday, October 31st, Halloween. That's the last day of early voting. Now, voters wishing to vote by mail must apply by Friday, October 24th. Ballots submitted by mail must be received by Tuesday, November 4th, postmarked by 7 p.m. on the 4th. I always wonder how they can check the postmark on the exact time that it was postmarked. I've never really noticed it saying the time, so they must have some other way in Texas. Either that or I'm just really not paying attention enough. Who knows? Could be me. Ask my assistant, Tim. Yep, he's shaking his head. Could be Linda. All right, so anyway, voters who cast a provisional ballot due to not presenting an acceptable photo ID at the polls have until Monday, November 10th to, quote, cure the ballot by presenting the necessary documentation. The last day for election officials to complete the canvass of the votes is Tuesday, November 18th. Now, Texas law requires voters who vote in person to provide one of the following 7 acceptable forms of ID: a Texas driver's license, a Texas election identification certificate, Texas personal ID card, Texas handgun license. I like that one. They can present your handgun license. U.S. military ID, U.S. citizenship certificate, which does not expire, or a U.S. passport, either your book or card. Voters 18 to 69 IDs must be current or have expired no less than 4 years prior to voting. Voters 70 or older may use an expired ID for any length of time, provided it's otherwise valid. Those without the required ID may still vote by presenting a supporting form of ID from an alternate list and completing a quote reasonable impediment declaration. That's the first time I've heard that one. So for more information, voters are encouraged to visit their county elections office or consult the Texas Secretary of State's website for the rest of the information. What state, previously governed by figures like Bob McDonnell and Ralph Northam, is the only one in the United States where governors are prohibited from running for consecutive terms? And the answer is Virginia. I actually think that's a great idea. Wish Connecticut had that. Anyway, all right, so we're going to go to our new segment that we've added. It's called Elections and Voting Terms. Because I know we talk a lot about different words that have to do with elections, but some of the people out there might not know what they actually mean. So our first word, actually it's two words. Yeah, well, it's terms. It's called provisional ballot. Now, this is from Ballotpedia, which I got on September 28th, 2025, because there's a lot more information that goes with this. So a provisional ballot is a ballot cast by a voter whose eligibility to vote cannot be proven at the polls on election day. If, after the election, administrators determine that the voter who cast the provisional ballot was eligible to vote, the ballot would then be counted as a regular ballot. Now, federal law requires most states to provide for a provisional balloting process. States that have enacted same-day voter registration processes as of 1993 were exempted from this requirement. So as of 2024, every state except Idaho and Minnesota had established a provisional voting process. Now, although federal law mandates provisional voting processes, the states themselves define those processes. Consequently, provisional balloting can vary widely from state to state. So what you might want to do is just go to Ballotpedia and look up provisional ballot, and then you can scroll down, and they have it divided into several different sections on how the provisional ballots are done, but it's also by state when it's listed out. So you can just go click on the state that you're looking at, and you'll have the rest of the information that you're looking for. So that's what a provisional ballot is. So now we're going to go on to national info. And this comes, oh boy, from the New York Times. September 25th, 2025. Now I got to tell you, I am not one to read the New York Times. And as I kind of joked in my emails with Tim and Olivia and Matt that have something to do with my show, that this one was leaning so far left, they're in danger of absolutely falling over. I couldn't believe what I was reading. So anyway, there is good information in there. So the rhetoric in this article, again, is just over the top. So you probably don't want to go and read the article. It was absolutely exhausting reading. So I condensed it down. So what I'm going to tell you, I condensed down from like 4 pages of information. It was just crazy. So anyway, the lawsuits by the Department of Justice for non-compliant with requests for voter information cover the following states: California, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. And this also follows Maine and Oregon lawsuits that we spoke about in the last week or two. I got to tell you, that article is lots and lots of whining, complaining, not just from the Secretary of States, but others that they had interviewed within these states that are being sued. I'll tell you, it's no big surprise because, again, New York Times are leaning left. But if you want actually a laugh on how they write their articles and how they whine and complain about something that every state should be complying with, then you can go and read it. So this week, our vote notes. Our vote notes: South Carolina can give voter data to Trump administration, said the Supreme Court. So what you're going to want to do if you want to read about this on South Carolina and the decision by the Supreme Court, you go to our vote notes, click on the link, and you can read the entire article. Again, our vote notes are for articles that are extremely long, and you'll always find they're ones worth reading, which is why the New York Times is not a vote notes. Should point that out. I'm not going to have you go to our vote notes section and read something absolutely ridiculous. That's not going to happen. So now let me just give you a few of my thoughts. Again, as many of you know, I read through so many different articles, and I do have to thank at least one organization that is phenomenal, and that's Election Transparency. They usually come out just about every day with headlines of information nationally, and then state by state, particular states, and then towards the end, they have all other states thrown in. So they are a wealth of information. So I go through their stuff. I go through the Texas scorecard. If you live in Texas and want to know what is going on in your state, not just with election integrity, but everything that's going on with the legislators, a whole bunch of things. I mean, you guys have been arresting a lot of teachers in the schools for improper behavior and a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, they're on top of all of this. But Texas scorecard, I would say, is absolutely worth looking at, especially if you're in the state of Texas. And you also have the group we had on a few weeks ago, the True Texas Project. Look them up. They're a nonprofit organization. They are also going to be giving you a lot of information on Texas. Another source for people, because we're constantly asked, how can I look up my voter registration? Now, every state, if you have either your social security number, your date of birth, whatever information your state wants on you in order for you personally to be able to look up, you go to your Secretary of State's office. Now, if you want to find out whether your grandmother is still registered to vote, even though she passed away, 16 years ago, what you would do, and I believe it covers 36 states, you can go to voteref, voteref.com. And there are 36 states on there that allow the public to see the information. And you just click on the state, put the information in, and it's a good resource. There's a number of others that you can go to. Check My Vote. That's another one that's very good. And like I said, there's a few others that are out there, but those would be the ones if you want to look things up, go ahead and do that. But again, I read through so much information, and I'll tell you, it just absolutely astounds me on why the Democratic states, mostly Democratic states, are fighting back so much with the Department of Justice. The voter rolls across the country are an absolute disaster. Disaster. People who should have been removed, federal laws not being followed. Your information is readily available. Your name, your address. There's not, and sometimes it's not your full date of birth, but your information is out there. And all they're trying to do is make sure only people who are qualified to vote are voting. And that the way the information is processed within your state follows federal law and state law. And I'll tell you, there are so many that are not. We're not even going to go into people who are double voting, the dead people that are voting. And yeah, there's a lot of dead people that are voting. We know it's not them. We know it's the nefarious ones figuring, well, we know they're not going to walk into the polling station. And if somebody is lax in having to show a photo ID or an ID, like in Connecticut, you don't have to show an ID. No. Go in, just say the person, and you go and vote. It's a problem. All we want to make sure is that even within your own community, your town, you want to know who's in charge of raising your taxes in your town. And you want to make sure only people in your town are the ones that are voting. Not somebody who sold their house, 18 years ago and still votes because they're still on the voter roll. And those are the ones that are usually voting absentee, by the way, because they've already been living in another state for, those other 18 years. We need to make sure our voter rolls only have the citizens living in your town, and to only have, and this is like super important, U.S. citizens. You must be a U.S. citizen to vote in our elections. You don't vote in elections in France. You don't vote in elections in England. I was going to say Russia, but I don't think they vote. I mean, or communist China or any of those. So again, it's like really important that the information of the voter rolls is being looked at by the Department of Justice. Because I'll tell you, there's some nefarious people that you may think are your buddies in your town hall, in your county, and it'd be like, oh, Mary would never do that. She would never actually put someone in and register them that didn't exist. You'll be surprised on what has been going on across the country and why it is so important. The people in the election integrity field or network, everybody's trying to do a bunch of things to make sure your vote counts. Like Fight Voter Fraud, we want one vote for one legal voter. It's been almost 7 years. We have been working and trying every different direction on what we can do and actually having the powers that be actually do their job. The dead people, when they're dead, they're not supposed to be voting. I know you think grandma would have voted a particular way, and when you get her absentee ballot in the mail, you just can't help it to have one more time that grandma's voice is heard. But just so you know, that's a felony. That's a felony. You can't be voting for somebody else. It is against the law. It's against state law. It's against federal law. And I'll tell you, don't think that you won't be caught, because there's a lot more information out there and a lot more people sifting through things to see what's going on and how it's being done. The counties with the most problems, it's being focused on. Those are the ones that scream and yell the most. Oh, there's nothing wrong. Nothing wrong here. Nothing to see. Go away. We're doing everything perfect. Just like if you ask our Secretary of State here in Connecticut, everything is perfect. Those 219,000 people who should have been removed off the voter rolls a year ago, don't worry about it. It's fine. I got to tell you, the cough in the background is Tim. He's my technical producer. I shouldn't have said that with Connecticut while he was sipping water. Sorry about that, Tim. Oh, so anyway, I always have to bring up Connecticut because we are an absolute prime example. And you will have a number of people, especially here in Connecticut. We have someone called Senator Blumenthal. Does that name ring a bell? Yes. The Senator Blumenthal that represents Connecticut, his son is a senator here in Connecticut. And he will tell you that there is no voter fraud. There are no issues. And how bad and horrible fight voter fraud is when we bring up all the information and we bring forward the evidence. I told you, we're terrible. We're horrible people, according to them. So anyway, one of the other things that we wanted to let you know, if you would like data analysis on your county, your town, or your state, all you need to do is go to fightvoterfraud.org, fill out the form, give us a couple of days, and we will send you an analysis. Now, this is an analysis. It is not the voter rolls. It is an analysis to let you know the people whom are double registered and potentially have double voted, not only in your county or your town or your state, but in another state as well. You have to do your own due diligence. We always say that because we're not perfect, but we are certainly not as bad as Blumenthal says we are at all, not even close. So we would love if you would do that. And we also have training. We would send you an email with the information, and we also have the person who put it together. So if you have any questions, she'd be more than happy to answer them. And we also tell you how you can actually get some training from us on what you are going to need to prove to your law enforcement officials in your county, your town, or your state. Well, I want to thank everyone for watching us here on OBBM Network TV. I mean, the purpose of our program, SYNC-O-WICZ, is to educate the public on election integrity and things that are going on across the country. And if you have any information you'd like us to get out there, please send us an email at info@fightvoterfraud.org, and we will certainly get back to you. So thank you so much for watching us on OBBM Network TV, on Rumble, and on YouTube. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.